I'm Theo. I'm the head of programming here at Try Together, and I'm here to welcome you to this month's Learn Together. I'm super excited to introduce you to this month's speaker, Elizabeth McWhorter. Elizabeth is an entrepreneur who's combining her personal experiences and also her professional skills to make really great change through technology. As the CEO and co-founder of ThriveIEP, a technology that works with student support networks to best support our students' learning. She's addressing the very issues that many of our own students face at Try Together. And with that being said, we're super excited to hear more about your work, Elizabeth, and your motivations.
You're on mute.
Oh my goodness. I was being so smart.
Love that.
I'm in the basement of our house and my kids were just upstairs sounding like a herd of rampaging elephants. So hopefully
You're
that's
welcome to join us.
I don't know if you want that, but I am thrilled to be here. So I thought I could start with just a quick introduction of myself, a little bit about my own journey, and then I would actually love to hear from the people who are in the room right now about just like something about why you're here and one thing that you would like to learn or hear about this evening so I can adapt what I'm talking about to each of you. Um, I am a mom of two amazing dyslexic, ADHD, neurodivergent humans. Um, my son is 12 and in seventh grade, and my daughter is 8, almost 9, which is terrifying, but she acts like she's like 24 and is in third grade. Um, we started this journey when my son was in kindergarten, and he was flagged by his kindergarten teacher, and she kind of pulled me aside and she said, "Hey, something's up. James isn't really learning how to read the way we expect him to. You should ask for him to be assessed." And then she dropped this giant clue in my lap about the education system, and she said, "If you send me an email, it will happen faster." And in hindsight, it was this like nugget of truth that influenced every part of our journey through the public school system. And and the big takeaway is that as parents, as caregivers, as the people who know our kids the best, however it is we define our kids, that that we are the people who are the keepers of their whole selves and their whole journey, and that the special education system in particular has a protected seat at the table for us. And so when we think about how we support and enable student success for students who have disabilities, and I use the term disability in an empowered way as somebody who identifies as somebody with a disability, that's not a bad thing. It's a statement that I require things that help me fit into the world as it currently exists. Um, but kids with disabilities, students with disabilities are often seen as problematic. They're not seen as whole, and they are often seen as a tally of test results. And so our role as a company, as myself as a parent, and you all from my perspective as people who really care about kids and their educational success, that part of that is actually seeing that whole kid, that whole student, and carrying that forward, and also helping them see themselves as a whole person. Um, other things that may or may not be relevant. I'm one of the very common story right now is that parents, especially women, whose kids are diagnosed with things like ADHD, dyslexia, autism, who are now in their 40s and all of a sudden are learning about things, because their kids have them, and they look at their kids' scores and test results and they're like, this is very familiar. And so I'm one of the many parents who discovered that they had a learning disability, because their kids were diagnosed with learning disabilities, which is very, very common. Um, And yeah, and then that advocacy work brought me to this founding Thrive IEP, as well as joining in local advocacy, where I'm the co-chair of the Arlington Special Education Parent Advisory Council, and do other fun things around this space. So I'm just excited to be with people who want to hear me talk about it. So with that, would love to hear from you all about who you are, what brings you here, and what you're hoping to take away from today.
I'll be bold. I'm Paul, and I'm here because I'm here to learn what you have to say. I don't have any preconceived notions at this point. The only thing is that I have to share that I had a nephew who was ADD, and they instead of being classified learning disabled LD, he took
Yep.
LD as learns different, and it
Yep.
worked. It was a good attitude.
Yep.
But that's about the
Absolutely.
only thing I bring to the table right now. So I look forward to tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ben. I'm here because I love to teach. I love to tutor. I've been tutoring for a while as a student tutor at school. But now working with Try Together, I'm with a totally new demographic. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to pick up some new skills and learn some new information about the kind of people I can expect to be working with.
Great. Love that.
Ben is an example of someone who received a Thrive IEP report.
Oh,
Let them get started. Yep.
excellent.
Yeah.
I can go next. My name is Mia, and I'm one of the new Try Together tutors for this next year. Both of my brothers have IEPs and have used them throughout their whole education experience. And so, as I begin as a tutor, I really want to make sure that I'm being inclusive when I am teaching people.
Awesome.
My name is Deborah, and I have a niece who has two nieces that I now have custody of, and they both have IEPs. And I'm just trying to learn more about how they work, what they do, how they're going to help them, how they're not going to help them. Just getting more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
I did want to add, so my brother has an IEP or had, I guess he's graduated. I don't know how that works. And for a large slew of things, and I watched growing up how much my mom had to advocate for him to have the services that it literally just outlines, like straightforward, this is what he gets, and it was a fight every time. And
Yep.
so I imagine in a situation where guardianship is changing, or there's one person in charge of education, but another person that they're living with, or when
Yep.
our students, the situation is quite complex. Like, who is advocating, right? How do we make sure, obviously, we are, if we're trying together, we are educational support, we are tutors, but how do we make sure we know what supports this kid needs from at least from us? So I'm really excited.
Yes, exactly.
Hi, I'm Tata. I actually have two kiddos with very different needs on IEPs, and they're in high school now, which I feel like has been so far the hardest to navigate.
Yeah.
It seems like in the high school system, in American public school system, there's like zero understanding on how to even grade students who may be learning differently. So it's been a very interesting learning experience, but also exhausting struggle to even be able to align like competency determinations and with everything changing in the state, whether or not, some sort of a test is going to be required for them to meet graduation requirements. So it's just been extremely difficult, unclear. And I feel like oftentimes even when maybe administrators or even teachers want to help, they don't really have the tools or they don't even understand how it's possible to align accommodations or to maybe look at grading certain assignments or changing assignments to meet the disabled students' needs. So it's been
Yeah.
eye-opening for me how little high schools are prepared to support the students.
Yeah.
They sort of almost expect a lot of the students to walk out without a diploma, which has been super frustrating and disappointing to learn. Like to them, they're just a number, and a very small number.
Yeah. Yeah. High school is tough. Anybody else?
Um, I'm Linda. I'm a court-appointed special advocate, and my supervisor sent me the link for this to get some more information. I have been following two brothers for the past 5 years. One came into foster care with the diagnosis of autism, and the younger one was in the past year diagnosed with autism and Tourette's, and it was a long struggle, a year and a half, to get him evaluated and figure out what was going on. We had a terrible time in school.
Yeah.
And now they're doing very well. They're 9 and 12. And it's come to the point where the judge has to decide whether they're going home or whether they're staying where they are and being adopted. So I'm not looking forward to that decision because it could just wreak so much havoc in their school lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Linda, what you just outlined is the perfect example of why we do what we do and like what we're seeing on the day to day as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Okay. So before we jump in, I'm thinking, since it sounds like we've got a lot of different experiences in the room, it might be useful. I have a couple of slides that are just like the basics of special education. So that we've got some shared vocabulary, understanding of process, and then we can kind of dig a little deeper if that sounds good.
That sounds great. In my
Okay.
opinion.
Um, okay. Um, So this is my intro slide. So basically, just to give you a view of Thrive IEP, and excited because Try Together is one of our first customers. We're a team of educators and healthcare professionals, leading thinkers around assessments and educational interventions, and we've come together to try to bridge the gap between data and actual understanding and action that support students. And so we do that at a couple of different levels, including with tutors like the volunteers that Try Together, to help make sure that the students that you're serving, that you have what you need to know most about those students so you can be as effective as quickly as possible. Um, and our vision really is, and I hope you heard this in my story, is that we exist in a world where learners are supported to believe in and live out their full human potential. So this is about people being seen as whole and valuable, and then getting what they need both from themselves, but also from others around them, whether it's the school or service providers or family members. So a little bit about disability at a high level. So a couple of big takeaways. So one is that disability is really common, and most disabilities are not things that we can see. So across the United States, over 15% of public school students receive special education services. That's over 7.5 million students across the US this year alone. And in Massachusetts, that percentage is actually a little bit higher. It's around 17, 18%. Most of the disabilities that you see in school aren't visible. So if you're walking through a school building, you're not going to know unless you really know what to look for. This is slightly dated information in this chart, but to give you a sense of percentages, so in the 2021-22 school year, and this is data from across the United States, almost 35% of students who receive special education services had what are called specific learning disabilities. These are things like dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, um, and they are directly impact a student's ability to learn specific academic content without additional interventions. We also have the next area is speech and language impairments. Other health impairments is a big one. So this is where you often see ADHD come in, traumatic brain injuries, things like that often fall under other health impairments. Autism is our next big group at about 12%. That rate continues to go up, although most experts expect it to kind of steady out at some point. Part of that growth has been because we've evolved how we define autism. So it's a much more expansive category. But also there's been so much deeper understanding of autism. And so people are much more aware of it, both from the family side, but also the educator side. And then we have emotional disturbance, intellectual disabilities, and then other categories. So that could be, it could be anything from like blindness to, I'm blanking right now, but that's your smallest amount of the things that we think about the most as being a disability. I will note, because of the groups that you all are working with, one of the trends that we actually see is that oftentimes students who are categorized as having emotional disturbance are actually have other undiagnosed disabilities. So you see a lot of time, and you see this happen a lot with multilingual learners, with Black learners, that they'll be categorized as having emotional disturbance, and then there will be additional testing done at some point, and it's like, oh, they're actually dyslexic. But nobody was paying attention to that. So there's definitely some racial, ethnic, and linguistic bias that surrounds, as well as gender bias that surrounds these numbers. But this is the kind of big picture of where we are nationally. Okay, so then how do we actually serve these students? Special education is a legally protected category. It's part of a federal set of regulations that's called IDEA. And the top line is that all students have the right to a free, appropriate public education, which if you're in the special education space at all, this is FAPE. So people will just say like, my child was denied FAPE. That's what they're talking about. The and the other important piece here is that it's supposed to be in the least restrictive environment. So students are meant to receive services, as few pull-out services, as little time outside of the general education classroom as possible. This is to drive inclusion. It's because it works better when it's done well. And that's part of why we see in this next fact that about 2/3 of students with disabilities spend 80% or more of their time in the general education classroom. I would say anecdotally, once you hit that 80% of the day, like it's really probably more like 90-95% of the day. But 80% is the baseline cutoff for what your least restrictive environment category is. You will have other students who receive kind of more services, or they'll be in what's called a substantially sub-separate classroom, which is a classroom that's dedicated to a specific kind of need area. And one of the interesting facts is that a lot of kids actually start with early intervention. So we think of special education as something that starts when kids hit kindergarten, but in fact, early intervention, which is birth to age 3, is is a place where a lot of students, especially students with more kind of significant developmental delays or autism are actually spotted. They're receiving intervention much earlier. And Massachusetts has the largest percentage in the United States of kids in that birth to 2 age range that are receiving early intervention. So we're leading the pack on that front. So next essential piece of information. Within special education, there are two big categories of support. One is your IEP, which is your individualized education plan. The other is a 504 plan. These are covered by two different legal mandates. Your 504 plan is covered by Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which people often associate with the Americans with Disability Act. Your IEPs are covered by IDEA, which I always forget what that stands for, which is horrible. This is my ADHD brain kicking in. But the big difference is that if you require specific interventions in order to learn essential academic skills, you need an IEP. 504 plans are really about making accommodations or adjustments in the classroom, but they're not about receiving specific ongoing interventions. So like my kids with dyslexia have IEPs because they require very specific structured approaches to learning how to read. If they only had ADHD, they might only have a 504 plan because maybe they just need some additional accommodations in the classroom. So you will also see you can have students who have IEPs and 504 plans. So I have a friend who has a dyslexic child who also has type 1 diabetes. So they have a 504 plan for their type 1 diabetes and an IEP for dyslexia. So you do have people who like have both, but most of the time people either have an IEP or a 504. But the big takeaway is like the IEP is about needing to receive ongoing specific interventions over multiple years, most likely. So how does this actually happen? This is the most basic possible timeline I could think of to describe the special education process. For those of you who have been in this is going to feel woefully inadequate. But I think the big takeaways for me, if you're not deep in this, is that step one is there's a referral. So somebody raises their hand and says, something is going on, this child needs to be assessed. That assessment, the parent or the guardian, whoever is legally responsible for the child, needs to consent to that assessment. And then that assessment or series of assessment happens. There is then an eligibility meeting. And in that eligibility meeting, they review the results of the tests and they go through literally a decision tree where you say like, yes, we passed this stage or no, we don't. And the school and in theory, the caregivers together agree that the student is eligible or not eligible for special education services. If they are deemed eligible, there is then a follow-on meeting to actually create the IEP or the 504 plan. And then if you have an IEP, there's an annual review process. You get progress reports specific to the IEP with your other progress reports from the school. And then there's also a triennial review. So every 3 years, all of the testing is legally required to be redone. And so you start the whole process over again. There are many, many, many smaller steps along the way, but that's kind of the big picture of how this works. So the reason why it's like this is because we actually want to have the data to guide how we make choices about what a student does and does not need. And then final point about this big special education experience is that this is the only place in the school experience where parents or caregivers have a legally protected seat at the table. So this is a place where the school is actually required to work with you. They are required to listen to you. They don't have to agree with you, but you're able to be there. And I think there's lots of rules and regulations. We have an advocate in the Zoom room who can talk much more eloquently than I can about those. But I think the big piece that I think about, and when I talk to parents that I really try to hit on, is that your role is really to advocate for your whole child because the team is going to change, the testing is going to change, and the school only sees a child while they're in school. And they don't see what happens when they come home, and they don't see all of the things that a caregiver sees. And so the this isn't just a kind of negotiation around service deliveries. It's an opportunity to really center that whole picture of a child with all of their strengths and all of their challenges and help ensure that the school and the plans that are developed to support that kid actually reflect that whole child and take all of those pieces into account. Um, with that, I will stop sharing. Do folks have questions about that? Does anybody in the room who's been through the process want to add any additional kind of commentary or corrections?
That was very helpful. Thank you. And the whole idea of the protected seat at the table is like both beautiful that it's there, but also like, wow, it's only there for this. You know, if there's it.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
little,
yeah. And I will say that for those of you who are tutors, um, having like identifying what is working in your tutoring sessions, saying like, I really saw this kid light up when I did this, and sharing that back with the parent or the caregiver can be really essential because they can then share that back with the school. So there's this opportunity to close a loop. Um, because you may see things because the student is out of context. Like when the like kids, I mean, we all behave differently when we're in different contexts, but you may have an opportunity to get a glimpse of how this kid can be with a different set of supports or a different set of interventions that can then be carried back to the school, which is, I think, really high value. I think that the other thing that I've been thinking about and as um it is the importance, and this is part of why I was so excited to be working with Hannah and all of you, is that the the importance of being able to sift through all of that information. So we have so much information about these students, but not all of it is equally important, and not all of it is work that we can take action on. And so part of the value of what we've really been focusing on is this idea of like what is most important and what do we as tutors, as caregivers, as educators um want to be focusing on what and wanting to be lifting up. And I think that's part of where like focusing on what are the strengths, what are the areas of interest, how do you get somebody in their comfort zone and feeling much more confident and like they have that trusting relationship that I think for any student, virtually any student who's been in a special education environment, um, that that they often have tenuous relationships with adults. And so spending time on that trust and that human connection, in addition to the whatever the academic content needs to be, is going to be even more important. And I know that that's also true for students who are in the foster care system. Um, and so would really encourage you to pay attention to that that human contact part of this along the way.
And one interesting thing, I know you're not going to do a huge plug of Thrive IEP. My plug is that it's amazing, and I know for at least a lot of our tutors has like made especially that first session hugely
Yeah.
different because you're given. If you're a tutor on here and you didn't receive one, I probably didn't get an IEP for your student, and you should contact me, and I will get you one. But one interesting thing we do is we actually don't just provide Thrive IEP software with the IEP, we also provide it with my interview with the student, my
Yeah.
notes from that. So for those of you who have gotten one of these documents, that's like a mixture of these 40-page wild documents that I would never ask you to read through and you're not like trained to read through, but also of these things that this student has told me about their learning style. And at least from those who have talked to me about it, it's been really helpful.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, listening, asking questions, listening to these kids.
Yeah.
Like most educators aren't actually asking them how they think they learn best, what they are interested in.
Yeah, my new favorite question, especially with the younger students, is think of your favorite teacher. How did they teach you?
Mm,
And that's been the one that's like revealed the most. Because some students, the answer is, Miss Smith. And I say, like, why was Miss Smith your favorite? And they're like, she was really nice. And like that sounds just like surface level, but that's actually means a lot. And then
yeah,
if you keep digging, it's like she was always on my team. It's like, oh, well that's important. That's a strategy, right?
yeah,
Everything means something. It's cool.
yeah.
But I don't
And I
want to take up
think,
all the time. If other people have questions, feel free
yeah,
to chime in as well. Or I can just keep going all day. Oh, and you also are welcome to put them in the chat if you don't want to shout it out. Do you ever find that while I'm waiting for people, do you ever find that people are um put into the category of IEP 504 incorrectly? Do you find that that's an issue?
yeah,
And kind of like what's the repercussions of that, I guess?
yeah. So I think what I see and hear from parents the most is that they really want an IEP, like they feel like their student needs direct intervention and and they walk away maybe with a 504 and it kind of feels like a consolation prize. Um, I think there are and sometimes you'll get like you'll see students shift off of an IEP onto a 504 because the school believes that whatever the skill is fully remediated. And then it can be really hard to get back onto an IEP. So I see that happen not irregularly. I do think though that the school, and I think part of it is that interventions are expensive. It's cheaper to accommodate. It's less effective if they actually need an intervention. Um, but uh, but it's also the IEP process is much more legally bound. So the caregiver has rights to, like in Massachusetts, you can do what's called stay put, which basically means like if the school is trying to take away services or make significant changes to the IEP and you disagree, you can invoke your stay put rights, which means that the child's IEP continues forward while you are negotiating with the school district. And that can last for years sometimes, depending on how kind of fraught the situation is. So there's incentives all over the place, and there's not enough resources, and it's very tricky. But yeah, I think I hear most about students who probably should be on IEPs who are on 504s.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the sort of socioeconomic demographics you see and sort of like if there is a difference in
Yeah,
access to those resources.
yeah. So definitely a difference in access. There are different ways that this skews. So you see more students who are in a lower socioeconomic bracket who are receiving IEPs. So you have a higher percentage of IEPs. You also, but but you don't see those. But you also see more kind of like misdiagnoses within that. So you have kind of misidentification of disability happening more often within that grouping. But then the other thing that you see is that and this is pretty common in Massachusetts, a little bit less common in some other states, um, but you'll see where you start to really see things kind of like cleave apart is when parents have significant resources to supplement the educational experience. So this is part of why I believe there hasn't been kind of more significant change in a place like Massachusetts around reading instruction, because most parents and caregivers who can afford to do so get a tutor, and their kid learns how to read, even though the approach to instruction in the vast majority of wealthier districts is horrible and is proven to not work. So, but when you have money, you're able to supplement. And so I think you see a couple of different dynamics playing out there.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's almost like Try Together is here to level the playing field a little bit, but wouldn't it be nice if it didn't need any leveling?
Hmm.
Nice. Wouldn't it be nice if in school everyone was getting
Yeah,
the support they needed?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I still want to be necessary in life, but like, you get my point.
yeah. Yeah, but like there are districts where that are like very wealthy school districts where like most parents of dyslexic kids move because they're that bad, like from a dyslexia intervention perspective. And so it's not always correlated to money. It's more complicated than that.
Anyone else have any questions for the wonderful Elizabeth? And we have a wide range of perspectives here, so if anyone wants to chime in, you're more than welcome to. Well, thank you for joining us, Elizabeth.
It's my pleasure. And if I could just like my closing thought is like, thank you all for everything that you do. And I really hope that like if you can hold on to one thing, it's the idea that these kids are all amazing and all have talents, and when we hold on to that and we build relationship and we operate with the belief that they can and will learn, that we can do anything.
I love that. Can and will learn. Love that.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you
Thank
everyone for
you.
coming. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great night.